And this is the first time I ever tried to teach like a crowd, more than 2 people. And I ain't had to get in front of a bunch of people like this in about 15 years. So if I get a little squirrely, just look over me. So just the basics of it, and everything I do here, I don't use no copper or no steel, no modern stuff. I mean, a lot of nappers do, and that's okay. I ain't trying to disparage anybody that wants to use copper, steel, or anything like that. But my thing is that I try to replicate what I see, what I find in like Native American stuff. And they sure didn't have no steel or copper tools, so really what I try to do is just replicate stuff that I find. And this, like this board here, this is all artifacts that I found. As I'm saying, Todd's been with me on a couple of these trips and we found them. And you can see this here, there ain't none of them really perfect. And that's what you see in a lot of Native American artifacts. Most of what you see is kind of, you'll look at it and you'll think to yourself, this is what happened to me anyways, and this is what got me curious in this. I just got interested in finding arrowheads the last 3 years or so. And I'd look at them and I'd pick them up and I'd think, well, why did they leave that big hump on there? Or why is that not symmetrical? Well, now I know that I try to make it with the same stuff that they was doing, so now I understand why. You'll have asymmetry and stuff, or you'll have a knot here that you think they should have broke off. But just a curiosity about this stuff that made me want to get into it. And it's just hard for me to fathom that people thousands of years ago could go out into their environment and find things to make viable weapons or tools. I mean, deadly weapons. We ain't just talking about something you're gonna cut leaves off a stick with. Some of these could have very well took lives, human lives, animal lives, whatever. They was made to be weapons, you know. This was these people's whole lives, you know.
And where would you find those? In creek beds?
Well,
along riverbanks? Did you excavate them, or
just all of the above?
Okay.
Both those two are in the corner. Them was found in a creek. Me and Todd excavated.
Let's see.
This one.
That one almost looks like one from up there in Peach Orchard. You might have found that somewhere.
I think that was a field find.
Okay, yeah.
Me and Todd found this one, and I thought there was another in a cave. I found a lot of them in fields.
And I guess you
just all over the place.
Naturally go to an area that's known to have been an Indian reservation or camping.
Well,
you wouldn't have gone in your backyard, I guess what I'm saying.
Well, it just depends on where you live.
He's dug them in his yard.
I found them in my yard.
Okay.
Just anywhere that you find sign of like primitive people, just find flint chips really, because that's the only thing left. There ain't nothing left from hundreds or thousands of years ago. Hide and antler stuff like this that's been around their camp, that's gone.
Yeah.
So the only thing left is just stone like this.
Yeah.
Well, you probably will answer this question in a little
That's fine.
while.
And if y'all got questions, just holler them out.
I just kind of always wondered, like, you know, if you had a group of Indians, you know, maybe is it like one or two guys' jobs to make points for the group?
Well,
we've talked about that.
Yeah.
And also I always kind of wondered, you know, when you see a asymmetrical one or one that you might think, I don't know, why did this ever, like, I wonder, like, I just always have kind of wondered, like, is a guy leaning on a tree, man, is he napping away because he see, you know, how fast, you know, does that take an hour to make, or I guess you could put as much time into one as you want.
Exactly. Yeah,
or
you could.
Like a really fast one that
That's
you
true,
need like
too.
right away, you know.
Well, I'll hit on your last question there too about taking time. One thing you see in native artifacts, and this seems backwards and false, but it's true. The earlier primitive people, like paleo people and archaic people thousands of years ago, they made the best stuff because they was big game hunters. That was their primary source of food. And to be a big game hunter, you couldn't be making you couldn't be making points like this and expect to kill a elk or a buffalo or whatever. So the further you go back in time, the better their craftsmanship was because of how they lived. They had to have better stuff to bring down animals. So, and as time progressed, they started farming, and corn caught on. Corn would be like 70–80% of a lot of their diets. So then they started making stuff like this and this. Just stuff that you look at it and think, man, y'all couldn't do no better than that. But I mean, that was just their culture. They didn't rely on hunting so much. Of course, they had to defend themselves from other primitive people and stuff, but they just wouldn't so much set on making killer points because their culture, just like ours, has changed. How many people sit around nowadays and make arrowheads thinking they're gonna have to shoot a big buck with it or something? You know, it just humans changing and your culture changes. So that's part. And another thing about like maybe seeing like asymmetry in one, like this big one in the center. Two things, and I'm gonna tell y'all too, I'm not an expert at this. I've only been doing this about a year and a half. But the two things I know that will cause like asymmetry or cause a place, like a knob in a place that shouldn't be there or something, is a quality of your stone, and well, three things: your skill level, of course, and the type of tools you got at your disposal. If you've only got a rock, like this to nap a point with, you're not going to be able to put no notches in it. You ain't going to really be able to put no serrations in it like this. You're only going to be able to do what every tool you have allows you to do. Just like if you got a screwdriver, you ain't going to be able to drive nails, right? It ain't made for driving nails. It's the same way with all these tools here. It just looks like a big pile of horn, these is all whitetail antlers too. This ain't nothing fancy off ball. This ain't moose or red stag or anything fancy off the internet. These is all whitetail antlers. Sheds that I found, that there was actually from the first buck I ever killed. Kind of sentimental. Stepdad gave me a couple, cut them up, and but each one has a tool, and I'll go over that too. Or each tool has a purpose, a specific purpose. So I guess the first thing I'll go over is material. There's all kind of, and I'm gonna try to go. There's a lot of stuff to hit on, and I'm going to just try to hit on all the. Go ahead, sir.
But I have a question. I don't want to veer off too far from the arrowhead.
No, you're fine.
Would you know anything about the shaft that they made, and what type of wood they used, and how they straightened that shaft? And is it true that they could heat treat the shaft and the feathering? Was it a turkey barb, or would you know what?
I think it just depends on the time period and the culture and what they was hunting and all that. But I know for a fact that they use pipe canes. You know, what we call cane poles, fishing poles.
Yeah, yeah.
The hard cane pipes, they use those. A sourwood tree, the root sprouts off of a sourwood tree naturally grow straight.
Okay.
If y'all know a sourwood tree, you probably know what I'm talking about. The sprouts off of them just naturally grow straight as an arrow, and they say those work real well. And I've not done any of this. I've read up on it and watched some videos and stuff, but the way they would heat treat them, you can't use a green arrow, all that sap, you know. So even if you have your point on there, it's going to dry over time, and then your point's going to get loose. So you do have to heat treat it by far in ashes, the way I've seen it.
Okay.
You let your fire burn down, and you kind of roll it in ashes, bend it over your knee a little, straighten it like that. But
okay.
Yeah, they did heat treat them the seasonal. That way, when they hit, they didn't have no give. They went straight through, and your point wouldn't come loose.
Okay, I was always curious. And one more question on that sinew, man. Is that some particular part of that deer, or is that the silver skin?
It's both. Yeah.
You
can use the silver. What did you call it?
Silver skin.
Silver.
Like
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
there's
that coating that covers like the meat,
right,
or
like
the muscle
like
groups.
a sack that holds in there.
You can use that, but really, I think the best would have been like the big hamstring tendon.
Okay.
They would dry that, and once they get it dry, I think they take like a hammerstone like that and pound it out in the strips. That way, instead of having that one big old thick cord, you dry that thing and you just miller it to death with a rock until it's flattened. And then what you've done is created a bunch of little individual strands.
It's like a thread.
Like threads,
Very
exactly.
good. Very
And,
good. Thank you.
There's also a feller who's a professor that shared this with me here a while back, and he's made a lot of primitive stuff like this over the years. If any of y'all knows what dog bane is, it's a type of milkweed. He said you could take dog bane and break it at the top and strip it down, and all that, I don't know what, cordage, that you could get cordage off of that dog bane, and he said it's every bit as tough as meat skin.
Okay.
And I never knew that.
I didn't know
You
that.
cut your fingers if you try to pull on it and break it.
Yeah, I know. I've dug the roots of it before. We've dug roots and sold it, but I never did.
For dog bang is Indian hemp.
Indian hemp. That's what we called it. But I know what it was when he said that. But we always called it Indian hemp too. We dig it, sell the roots. Okay. Where is that? Material. There's good material and bad material. You can't make an arrowhead out of just anything. I mean, you can if you've been doing it for a decade or your whole life or whatever. You can probably make one out of these gravels, you know. But like I say, there's good material and there's bad material, and I brought some examples of both here to show y'all. This is quartz. This comes from around the Rock Castle River. If y'all been down there, you've probably seen it everywhere. Lake Cumberland's everywhere. And you can make stuff out of quartz, but this really is a bad example. And right there, if you all can see, is why. It's got little cavities, little pockets in it. That's bad. That's going to cause you problems, right? So, and it's not glassy, it's rough. You'll know a bad material when you rub your hand across it and it feels rough, like a sandstone or something. But that's mainly the thing to look for, is glassy material. See that, you look at that as opposed to this. This is obsidian, just regular black obsidian. And you can just see the difference in that. It's rough and smooth, it's just like a pane of glass. And this stuff here, this red stuff is obsidian too, it's just a different kind. But this is the sharpest material on the planet. You would think it'd be diamond or steel. I think it's like, I forget the nurse, like if they put this under a microscope and hone it or whatever, this is like 50 times sharper than steel or something. Unreal, unreal. This stuff will cut you and you won't even know you cut until you look and you bleed. It's super sharp.
Where's that mine?
Rocky Mountains, parts of Mexico. You don't really see much of it east of the Mississippi. Just very isolated pockets you see it. But I know this comes from out west, and it's killer material, and you can see why, because it's so glassy.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's what you want to look for. Smooth. Anything smooth is going to be easy to flat. Here's another example of obsidian, like a smoky can. And here you can see the rind in it. This is another thing about stone. Every stone will have a rind, and what the rind is where your good material meets bad material, like a sedimentary rock. See, it looks like a honeycomb or something, and that's rough. You try to hit that with something, it's just gonna disintegrate and blow out everywhere, and that will cause you problems anytime you have a rough rind like that. Another rough example, this is a Breathitt Church from where me and Todd live. And it's actually not because it's from Breathitt County where we live, it's because it's from the Breathitt Formation in the rock strata. So this is Breathitt Church. Rough stuff, hard to work with. It's sharp as it can be, but it's got a funny matrix. It's like you can see there, it's almost like it's got little squares in it. It's not straight at all. It's really hard to work. And here's an example of what can happen when you're using bad material and you hit stuff too hard, because you ain't got no business fooling with it to start with. Right there, I tried to take too much off in that bite, just hammer and hammer and hammer and getting madder. Broke it. That's Fort Payne Church. That's from around Lake Cumberland. But It's a good example of why you want to use good material. You don't want to fight with it if you can help it. Also, glass is one I didn't want to leave out. Glass. I really like doing stuff with glass. You see some of them made here with glass.
Wow.
It's real challenging, but you can make killer stuff with it because your plane's already so thin that anything you make is going to be killer and thin. But you just got to fight with that thing the whole way and keep from breaking it. Because you got, you overpressure it any bit, either with percussion or pressure, either one. And you're just going to shear that thing like a steel bolt or something. Especially when you get up into this lip right here. Because you got to go through that lip and then back down to where your plane's flat on both sides. Ideally, that's what you want. And like this is old, this is antique mason glass, so you have a big flat plane. Whereas nowadays, you'll have a concave side and a convex side. And it don't leave much meat. I mean, the bottom of that's that big, but you really aren't going to have this much of it this flat the time you nap that into the center there. I mean, you can nap it plumb out to the margins of that, but your point's not going to be straight.
You work that for both sides or just one side?
And the way you start that, I can show you out here later. The way you have to do that is you start going all the way around that thing.
Okay.
All the way around. Just keep working it down. Flop it over. Thinning it and trimming it down. And the most dangerous part about glass, not dangerous, but about breaking your point, is this part. You have to get through this first. And a lot of times what will happen is you'll be pecking on this to get down here where you want to make your point. And you'll start a crack. And if you can't get that crack to stop and break right there, it will just keep going and you'll shear it. So that's
More
part
or
of
less you can chase it then,
yeah.
once it starts.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. It's challenging, but that's another thing about this stuff. It's challenging, and you're gonna break stuff. If any of y'all decide to get into it, you're gonna break stuff. Man, I've broke a truck bed full of stuff, and I ain't been doing it a year and a half. I mean, some of this stuff looks killer, but I don't make killer stuff every time I sit down and make something. Like, you gotta crawl before you can walk. You know what I mean?
Is this all stuff you've made over here?
This here's all stuff I've made, yeah. I was actually going to donate. I think y'all do like a raffle or something, or a giveaway.
We're gonna do that.
I'll donate this in here for a giveaway there. But yeah, this is all stuff I made. All these are glass. Glass. That's a glass dagger I made there. But challenging,
Wow.
Half the time what happens with glass is I'll break it in half and then I'll have to make two. Alright, moving right along here. Tools. There's all kinds of different tools in flint knapping. I'm only going to go over Aboriginal tools, primitive tools, because that's all I use. So basically all you got is out in the natural world is rocks and some kind of antler or horn. So that's the stuff you're going to come across out in nature. So hammerstone, big hammerstone, small hammerstone. And the bigger the hammer, the bigger flakes you can take with it. The smaller flakes. And this in here, I really like this in here. I found this in at Lake Cumberland too. And this might have actually been a hammerstone for Indians. I found it around the Indian camp. But it's flat on one side and kind of convex over here. So if you have to do any secondary percussion where you're using it like a hammer in your hand and a punch, you fit your hand that way. But that's about my favorite little rock there for a hammerstone. Then you got all these antlers, punches and billets. Your big one like this, that's what you call a billet. Anything that you're using to hit this flint with that's not a rock is a billet. A billet can be wood, it can be a piece of pipe, it can be a piece of real seasoned hardwood. Anything you're doing this with is a billet.
You're actually striking it, not
striking it,
chipping
and that
it.
would be your a billet's use. This is called direct percussion. Percussion, just like anything else, man, you hitting something. You know, that's direct percussion. Indirect. It's the only difference. I'm not great at indirect. I can do a little bit if I get a rough spot and have to get it up there and punch it off. But I've seen guys take big rods this long and put them up under their leg. I can't do it. But you
Yet.
know, everybody's got their own
You
skill
can't do
set.
it yet.
Yeah, that's a positive way to look at it, I guess. But billet, here's another type of billet. Let's see if I can put one together that I've cut and show y'all how to saw them up. That's it. Okay. So this was the actual antler before I sawed it, and this is the best way I found. Everybody breaks them down different, right? Everybody does their own thing. This is how I cut them up. I cut the tines off here as close to the main beam as I can. That way it makes a small hump. It's still one there, but you cut your tines off, and then you got punches and pressure flakers. So there's 2 punches that come off that main beam, and then you cut him in half right there, right in the curve. Okay, and then what that creates is you can use both ends of this billet, and you can use your main beam as a billet this way, and use it as a punch and a pressure flaker this way. So you're cutting it that way. You got 2 tools here instead of just one that serves one purpose. And that's basically all you're doing with these antlers, is just taking and tearing off flakes, or taking and punching them off. Like, ideally, when you're doing percussion, you want to make big flakes like this. These is all flakes that I made in the process of thinning this down. This started as something like this size. So what you do, ideally what you want to do, is thin this down and try to make something from this. Make something, but in the process you want to drive big flakes off. And the reason you want to drive big flakes is because then you can make stuff out of all these flakes. If you're just crushing the edge all the time and just kind of whittling, you're really not. You're just making debris. You're not making anything you can go back and use later. Like you can make about anything out of that. Make an axe, a knife, a dagger, whatever you want. And then all your debbitage, all your chips, you can go back and make untelling how many arrow points, spear points, just depending on the size of it. But ideally, you want to make the best of the material you got. And it's took me a long time to learn how to do that. Man,
Do it from the edge?
Huh?
Do it from the edge?
Yeah, you start in at the edge. You thin it, and that's another, and I'm not great at that. Like right here, you'll have a thick place like that. Man, them give me fits. That's usually what causes me to break stuff, is thick places like this. I'll show you, here's a blade I've been working on, and this is not finished. I'm gonna say I've probably worked 5 hours on this, just getting it down from this. But I've not broke it, so in my mind I'm doing good. And
Yeah, 5 hours. I thought
Yeah.
it took me 5 months to do this.
But there's one that I've got down from a big spot. What we'll try to do is thin that down to make a blade for something like that I can put in an antler. But that's an example of what you want to try to get it thinned down to. And this is, or something like this. That's what a lot of primitive people would thin their stone down to, and they call that a trade blank. And that's what they trade up and down the rivers, like you were saying. That's what they take along with them instead of taking their stuff. Because maybe people 200 miles from here didn't want their arrowheads, but they could take their stone and nap their stuff with it. So, and you'd call this a preform too. It's not a great preform. I left it a little thick in places. But what you can do with this, and the reason they call it a preform, it's already kind of thinned and it's already kind of in a shape of something. So it is a preform of, say, a spear or an arrow point or whatever, a knife blade, whatever you want to make. So to make just like this, to make something like this, you got to get to this stage first. So it's a whole process. So you start like this, and then you kind of get it down. You start rounding it and thinning it, and then once you get a shape to it, you can kind of refine it a little more. And that's what you're doing all the time, is refining your product all the time. And if you're like me, my problem is knowing when to stop. I got a little bit of OCD, so if I see something that's off like a millimeter, I'll just keep driving at it, and then I'll snap it. And then I'll sit around and pout at myself why I didn't quit and just leave it alone. But that's a personal thing I got. So, let's see. Also, I was going to show y'all this. It's hard, I know it's hard for y'all to see little bitty stuff up here. All right. This is a point, really hard to see, I know. This is a point that I made from this old rough stuff. And the reason I wanted to show y'all this, when I got into flint knapping, this is really my goal, was to be able to go out in the world and find a rock and use tools that I found or harvested from animals and make a point. And this is proof of it. Like, this is my goal. And it's took me a while, but I got there. And it ain't great, it ain't pretty, but it's sharp. And it would work. And if I had to use it, I could, I guess. But it's took me a long time to where I could get to do this. I found this stone. This was a big rock I brought out of the creek, and I broke it down, and I fooled with it for 4 months. And yesterday I finally sat down and made a point out of it. And not just that this took me that long to get started, I failed that many times trying to make something from this. I finally got it yesterday. Pretty proud of that. But the thing about that is, when you set out, when you make yourself a goal like that and you set out and achieve it, it really gives you confidence in your abilities. And I'm not saying I'm great. I don't make any of this stuff to sell it or nothing like that. But it just makes you feel like that if you had to do something like this, you could. And just having that feel. And not only that, I enjoy doing this. So that drives you to want to do more and just keep your skill going. Or it does me, at least. It keeps me interested in it.
So if one were to take this up and attempt to develop your skill, just start using anything you can get your hands on, just
start breaking stuff.
To start breaking stuff.
Start breaking stuff. Yeah, that's what I done.
I'm
best way to learn.
I break a lot of stuff.
It's the best way to learn. I mean, I can sit up here and do this in front of y'all all day, but ain't none of y'all will learn as much as if you sit down and done it for 30 minutes on your own. And I mean, I know that because that's how it is for me, and I'm sure it is for everybody else. They're just
kind of high to use it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's another. These are beavers. Beavers that Mr. Whitmore here trapped up on our creek, middle quicksand. And tanned. Very, very well, I might add. This was actually one whole beaver that he trapped under my bridge. It was a problem beaver.
Oh, that is the one I caught down
yeah.
the bridge.
Right there's where I pegged him between the eyes with a 22.
Yeah.
So this was a beaver that come from my house. I split him with a razor blade, made me a lap pad. These beavers are tough, man. And I know, again, y'all can't see this, but right there where my finger is, there's probably about a number 7 bird shot right there in this beaver. It's plumb full of somebody laid the lead to him, probably coming up in their garden or their corn, and got the lead.
I found a lot of lead in them.
But they're tough.
Yeah,
they make a good lap pad, especially you get in the center of them like that. And you don't have to have 2, but I'm going to use 2. I'm going to use this smaller one, just because that way I can keep the flakes out of my way without flopping this big one everywhere. And it insulates me from beating my leg to death. I forgot my safety. Will you go down there in the truck and get my safety glasses, please?
Yeah,
They should be right there on the console. If they ain't, they some in this bag over here.
Little brushes on you, you probably know that.
Yeah. That's one thing I'll stress too. I don't use any gloves